Добрий день всім. Я вітаю всіх, хто приєднався.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome everybody who joined us. Ukraine Media Center to Current Forum continues its work. And right now in our studio we have Lyudmyla Denisova, Ombudsman of the Verkhovna Rada, the Parliament of Ukraine for Human Rights. Ms. Denisova, please tell us what sort of information you currently have about violations of human rights on temporarily occupied territories. Good afternoon. With regard to occupied territories, in those territories, violations of basic rights and freedoms of our citizens continue. First of all, we are talking about the right for life, including forced mobilization of our citizens into the military units of the Russian Federation in order to use those people in fighting against Ukraine. About filtration camps created there, we definitely have to speak about it, because now there have been a large number of our citizens who reside in occupied territories, and this is the case for the city of Mariupol in particular. They are brought to filtration camps located in temporarily occupied territories of Donetsk and Luhansk Oblast. In some of them, there are more than 20,000 of our citizens. Our citizens are brought there for a so-called filtration procedure, so that after that, some of our citizens who don't pass so-called filtration would be moved further, and we don't know about our fate. And those who pass filtration would be brought to the Russian Federation, would be forcefully deported into Russian Federation. I can show you 3 documents which are required for a person to be able to move across those occupied territories. The first document confirms that the person has passed filtration. That means fingerprinting. For example, a person who sent us the photos of those documents, they passed it on the 5th of April. Then to move around the city where the filtration camp is located, you need to use this pass. And then to leave the city, you have to have the 3rd document. So 3 documents to be received by a person. Those who don't pass that filtration, who fail to pass it, so the Federal Security Service of the Russian Federation consider them suspicious if they are against that so-called special operation by the Russian Federation in Ukraine. They are brought somewhere, transported somewhere, and the rest, there have already been 1,185,000 of our citizens, more than that, and including more than 200,000 children have been brought to Russian Federation. Occupiers have been destroying almost everything in those occupied territories. They are taking our food, our grain, and everything in order to reduce our citizens, to lower our citizens' opportunities for survival. In the city of Mariupol, our citizens are used to work through the rubbles. We know that now they are working on the drama theater destroyed by Russian troops. There are a lot of victims, and now our people become unconscious when they see what they see there. Now it's impossible to bury those dead bodies there. Those dead bodies are transported outside of the city of Mariupol into a huge mass grave. They want to bury them or to destroy those dead bodies using mobile crematoriums. There has now been mobilization into Russian armed units, not only in Donetsk and Luhansk Oblast, where those so-called Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republic want to draft people into military units, and there is no medical examination anymore. Just everybody is drafted. Everybody who can move is drafted. And now it's widespread not only in those 2 oblasts, but also in occupied parts of Kherson, Zaporizhia, and Kharkiv oblasts. In a similar way, drafting is done, has been the 15th drafting in temporarily occupied Crimea. There too citizens are drafted and they're forced to serve in the military and to do whatever the occupiers tell them to do to act against the Ukrainian people. So the situation, unfortunately, is not improving, but we see that as soon as the Ukrainian armed forces liberate cities, towns, villages from occupiers, we get more and more calls to our hotline, and our hotline has already received more than 35.5 thousand calls, and in the same way the number of calls increases on the whole hotline, free hotline, which is run around the clock for psychological support, mental support. Over the almost 40 days of operation of that hotline, there has been almost 900 calls to that hotline. Ms. Denisova, do you receive calls from temporarily occupied territories? Do people from there call you, and what are their inquiries mostly? Definitely they call us as soon as there is some connection. For example, in the city of Kherson there was some connection, some coverage, and people called, like directors of penal colonies and custody prison called us from city of Kherson. They said that there was a dangerous situation. The occupiers want to give weapons to those prisoners to use them in military action against Ukraine. And of course, we got calls from those people, from people who can reach us because they know the connection there is very bad. But people call us about humanitarian corridors, including, of course, humanitarian assistance. Sometimes people just call us from, for example, from Kherson Oblast, from Zaporizhia Oblast, from Kharkiv Oblast, from occupied parts of those oblasts. They call us and they shout loudly, "We haven't eaten anything for 2 weeks. We don't have water. We don't have anything. Please do something. Do something." You know, we have got calls from 35.5 thousand people, and there are 67,000 citizens just residing there. So people who called about humanitarian assistance, you know, there have been 3.5 thousand people against 33,000. So they represent. Everybody calls and says, we have 10 people or 20 people sitting there in this basement. We want to eat, we want to drink, we don't have anything, we don't have medicines. So there is this humanitarian situation in those occupied territories. We try to come to agree upon something with people who bring humanitarian assistance there. We inform volunteer supporters. We inform the International Red Cross about the needs in those places. We look for every opportunity, including they're also called from not only from occupied territories. We have that so-called humanitarian front, and my representatives work in various cities and towns, also in occupied towns like city of Kherson and non-occupied territories, but there is also a very serious situation there, and they provide that assistance jointly with humanitarian headquarters. Thank you, dear colleagues. You can ask your questions. Please speak into the microphone.
For giving the opportunity to ask a question. I would have several ones. First of all, what do you consider these people to be who were sent to the Russian Federation? Are you consider them to be prisoners? Because like prisoners of war, they can't be because most of them are civilians. What do you consider them to be? Is there any international organization, like for example, the UNHCR, who can help you with that, you know, support people who are at the very moment in Russia and try to reach their relatives in Ukraine and try to return to Ukraine? Have you got any support from other countries, like, for example, from Switzerland? Is there any contact going on with embassies who are still in Russia who might help you with getting your citizens back to Ukraine? And could you tell us a little bit more about how the filtration works? What kind of, you know, organization? Is it the MGB, I think it's called, in the Donetsk Republic? You know, is it like the special forces in the occupied territory? Who actually is, you know, responsible for proceeding with the filtration? Thank you very much.
Дякую за запитання.
Thank you for your question. I will start with filtration camps for you to understand it. Those filtration camps were created at the very beginning of full-scale invasion of the Russian Federation in Ukraine, including in the temporarily occupied territories of Donetsk and Luhansk Oblast. Those filtration camps were already created. They are located either in hostels or in schools, in technical colleges, in technical schools, and also in penal colonies. The whole penal colonies have been arranged to host those people to undergo filtration. This is one thing. Second, people were taken from basements on a mass scale when there was bombing also in those territories which were not occupied by Russian Federation as yet. People were brought on a mass scale from Mariupol. In some districts of Mariupol, there are only females, only women and children remaining there. All males have been taken from there. That's done by the Federal Security Service, FSB of the Russian Federation, Federal Security Bureau. They call it filtration. So people are first brought to those camps, they are checked, their clothes are taken off. They look for any special signs like tattoos and similar things. They inspect their phones. They inspect their connections. For example, whether they have any connection with the Ukrainian military, to those who participated in the anti-terrorist operation, to any public officials, to any governmental entities, and so on. And they ask questions. How do you treat this Russian special operation in Ukraine? What is your attitude? And this question, immediately shows if they see something suspicious, if the FSB sees something suspicious in that person's phone, that person is sent further to Donetsk, to Kyiv, and there are different filtration camps there. We don't even know how many people are kept there, but we know that it's about thousands. For example, in Bezimena, there is more than 20,000 people in those filtration camps. And there are people who pass those filtration camps, mostly elder people, women and children, and such people are brought by buses, for example, to Rostov Oblast, to Taganrog, to the city of Taganrog. There in Taganrog, they are put on board the train and they are brought all over the territory of the Russian Federation. And I do have evidence that the Russian Federation prepared in advance for such forced deportation. It was done in advance because we see all the facts, all the confirmations that there were instructions given in federal districts of the Russian Federation, the number of people who have to be accommodated there, and so on. There are reports from certain regions in the Russian Federation on where those people would be accommodated, the name of the facility, the name of the director of that facility, the phone number of the director of such facility, and the number of places, number of people to be accommodated there. And then there was a report by the end of April how many of those places have already been filled and how many are still available. So this is about the systemic activities of the Russian Federation to bring our citizens there and accommodate them there. We have data that, for example, in Yamalo-Nenetsk district there are 170 people. In Sakhalin Island there are people. In Nakhodka, in Primorsky area, in Wrangel village there are so many people. For example, we have got an appeal of 1,000 people held in the city of Cheboksary, in Ingushetia Republic. They want to get back to Ukraine. What's going on now? We work with volunteers, citizens of the Russian Federation, who care about our citizens. They send me personally some information about the places where they found, where they have seen some camp of our so-called refugees, as they call them, are held. But those are not refugees. Those are Ukrainian citizens forcefully brought, forcefully deported from Ukraine. They're brought there without almost any documents. Russian Federation takes all those documents from them, and so many children, many babies who were born in those shelters in their basements, and they have been transported with their parents to the territory of Russian Federation without any documents, any birth certificate even, just some document issued by the Russian Federation to the mother, that this mother has given birth to this baby. This is the only document. What do we do after that? Now we have been creating an international commission. I proposed to my colleagues, other ombudsmen, ombudspersons, that we should create an international commission to include ombudspersons from the countries neighboring the Russian Federation. We already have this interesting experience when we transport Ukrainian citizens using assistance of volunteer organizations to Estonia. We have families whom we have brought to Estonia, but then you see there is a problem. The problem is there has been 1.2 million people, and it's just several families. You know, these are incomparable numbers. I now work with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. They develop some mechanisms to use the embassy of one country, I am not to name this country now, who will provide consular services to our citizens, to issue them with some documents to leave Russia. Now we do it in a simple way. We are given lists, we check that those are indeed citizens of Ukraine, and we help them in transporting them using consular agencies. But this is a huge problem, and we need some solution. I spoke with the president of the International Committee of Red Cross, and we agreed upon cooperation with their rep office in the Russian Federation. There are their rep offices in the Russian Federation as well as Belarus and Moldova. We know that there are our citizens also transported to Belarus, brought to Belarus, so we have been trying to do something. I had a meeting with people working for the UN Office of the Commissioner for Refugees. We spoke with Ms. Bachelet, the High Commissioner for Refugees. Everybody is aware of that issue, and we have been developing the mechanisms. When I proposed to create an international working group to develop the mechanisms to implement it at the National UNRI General Assembly, that's the European Ombudspersons Network. We had Ms. Moskalkova, Russian Federation's ombudsman, present there, and she also agreed to work in that way. So we want to propose a mechanism to resolve this issue. Thank you. Any more questions? I'm Vladislav Obuk from Ukrinform. My first question is about information which was announced yesterday by Ukrainian media, saying that in such a filtration camp, a little girl, 4 years old, was split with her mother. Have you investigated into this situation? Have you contacted Ms. Moskalkova about the situation? And my second question is about getting our prisoners of war back. We understand that some of their statements are to be handled by security services, but there are also some statements about Ombudsman office, in particular about documenting the crimes committed by Russians about Ukrainian prisoners of war. Do they provide any information about those citizens being kept somewhere in prison of fascists or their proxies in temporarily occupied territories? Some information about people Ukrainian side was unaware of before. About your first question, it's a very difficult one. Now we are making everything possible to know where that girl is held. I'm not disclose any details now. We already have some experience, but some things are to be done confidentially. Your second question about the prisoners of war brought back by the Russian Federation. As soon as they arrive to the place of their rehabilitation, after they are debriefed by security services, special services, we interview them and we document information about crimes committed by the Russian Federation. Sometimes there are terrible things they tell us, like I had some very harsh discussions with International Red Cross Committee, because according to the Geneva Convention on Prisoners of War, there is clearly a mandate for ICRC established, which says that the party who has captured the military from the other party as prisoners of war, they should immediately share that information about the military held as prisoners of war. They have to record those documents, and we have established that it has been more than 1 month those prisoners of war were transported with a bag on their head across various territories in the Russian Federation. Some of them cannot even say where they were held, and their personal cards and official notification of our CRC only happened 1 month after, before they were exchanged, when they were transported to Sevastopol. So we want to see that ICRC should make all steps to implement their mandate. They should insist on notification by Russian Federation, because people are telling us terrible things. For example, one person spent 2 hours with a bag on their head, and there was a mechanical saw working. They said, now we'll cut your fingers from your hands, from your feet. And some people had to be held in mental wards. Some of our military need some special support, including mental support. We document all those things according to the protocols as we were trained at the end of February by the development program. Thank you. Any more questions? Please speak into the microphone. If I may, I have a question about Yulia Payevska. Do you have any information about her fair fate? And do you know legally when she disappeared, was she part of the National Guard of Azov Regiment or not? We are still investigating to this issue, so at the moment I cannot say anything, any information to disclose. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Denisova. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for this information, dear friends. Thank you for being with